Hello, and thank you for joining us for Together San Diego. I'm Paula Hernandez from the San Diego Union-Tribune. Our guest today is Sandra Dibble. As a journalist, she has spent more than 25 years reporting news stories on the border. In the new podcast, Border City, Sandra introduces listeners to Tijuana through the news stories that she covered and also through her personal connections in the city's cultural community and friendships with Tijuanenses. Thank you, Sandra. How are you? Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, I'm great. And thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Wonderful. Good to see you. So, Sandra, tell us about this new podcast that you have. Tell us how it is that, first of all, the stories that you covered on the border and also how the podcast came to be.
The podcast is called Border City, and it's an 8-episode series. It gets released every Tuesday, and each segment is half an hour. So it runs from when I arrived in Tijuana in 1994 and ends sort of in around 2019 when I stopped doing daily reporting. It was right around the time of the Central American caravans. So I've seen a huge changes. It's about sort of the huge changes and how I've changed in 25 years. Well, more than 25. It's 28 right now. But it's about the border and about living here and daily life and the challenges and the joys of living on the border.
When you mentioned the joys about living on the border, something that I've read about Border City is that you also covered some of the violence, but you covered some of the beauty and some of the belonging also in Tijuana region. Can you tell us some about this? Because I know it's an 8-part podcast. And as you mentioned, the episodes are available on Tuesdays. I am sharing on screen that people can listen to it on Border City at San Diego uniontribune.com/border city or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. There's 2 episodes currently available. But again, tell us about, the beauty, the violence, and also the belonging in Tijuana that you experienced.
Well, Tijuana, I've always said, is like a city of a million stories, right? And which ones are you going to tell? I told a lot. One sort of the narrative lines is the stories that I covered, right? And a lot of the stories I covered were about the drug trade and how that's changed since 1994. You see at the bottom left hand picture is Benjamin Arellano. He was the oldest of the Arellano Felix brothers, who basically came to dominate the Tijuana region. And when I was there in the 1990s, they were all powerful. I wasn't always that aware of that. I had a very, very capable office mate, Gregory Gross, and he was covering all that stuff. I was covering other stuff. So over the years, I've covered so many stories. There's not a story that I feel I haven't covered, though every day I discover new ones. It's an amazing region. The way I connected to the city, the way I started making friends was through music, and especially the classical music community. I would go to recitals. I would get to know some of the performers. There we have the Secut, this amazing sort of cultural center, which is really like, Balboa Park in one, concentrated place. I think people in Tijuana are very fond of it, and it's really not that far from the border. I've covered everything. And I think when you're telling the story of Tijuana, you have to talk about all the different challenges. One is the border crossing. When I first came, I actually used to ride my bike across the border, and that was a really fun thing to do on Sundays. I could count on crossing in about 20 minutes at non-rush hour. And now I have a Sentry, so that makes it easier. But I have a lot of friends who spend 2-3 hours a day in line. So the border has gotten a lot more congested, and it's partly due to security measures. When I first crossed, all I had to say was American citizen, and they would just wave me through because of my accent and my appearance. That's changed. I think what's interesting about doing this story and doing Border City is, Tijuana and San Diego are so profoundly connected, and yet they're deeply divided. And how do you address both, right? And they're both true. And one does not negate the other. And I think as a journalist, I had to talk about both. And that's what I did. And that's what I talk about in the Border City podcast.
Sandra, when you first arrived in the border region, you studied Spanish, you prepared yourself, you already knew some Spanish as well, and then you decided to live in Tijuana.
Yeah, I did because I came from Washington, D.C., and the idea of covering the border, it just seemed like, oh, what a cool thing to do, not even knowing much about it, right? And I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it all the way. I'm going to be a foreign correspondent, as opposed to a local reporter who crosses every day, So, these ideas that you have from far away, you idealize things. So I did move to Tijuana, and I lived there for 7 years. I did. And, it was very hard, but it was also very helpful because it forced me to get out to see the city. Like on a Sunday, I had nothing to do. So I would just drive. And some of my first friends were the merchants on Avenida Revolucion. And, they sort of took me in. There was a Senora Espinosa who was que descanse en paz, right? He's no longer alive. I believe his son is. And he had a curio shop. And he would talk to me about the crafts and where they came from. And, we became friends. And, if I didn't have anything to do, I would just kind of stop by and visit him sometimes.
Sandra, also you were there for more than 25 years covering the stories on the border.
Yes.
How was it that you selected which stories were going to be used for the podcast on Border City?
Oh, well, I worked very closely with an editor, an amazing editor called Susan White. And that was a joint decision, because how do you sum up 26 years, right? How do you do that? And at first, what we just did was chronologically, we just kind of looked like, okay, what were the big stories? What were the big news stories during my time there? And I would just do a timeline year by year. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, and then what happened to me, right? And one thing that was so clear, a narrative that it has is the drug trade and how it has affected residents at all levels of society, in different ways at different times, and how people have fought back and have sort of fought back to stay in the city. They love their city. And they love the region, right? And I think people in San Diego also. There are many people who live in San Diego who love Tijuana. Um, so there was that is a big narrative and then me just discovering the city and just meeting regular people. I think that's really enriched my experience, right? How do regular people react to everything that's going on? Sometimes not at all, right? They're just leading regular lives. They're, going to school or getting married or having a quinceañera. And so to be in these two different, the news reality, they're big news stories and they're very important for the region, but also to be in an everyday reality and to remember that, kids have piano recitals and ballet and picnics and there's just both sides, and I tried to get the richness of both sides. It's an amazing city.
Definitely is. Sandra, what can listeners expect when they listen to Border City podcast? So there's 8 different parts to it.
Yes.
As I mentioned, there's 2 episodes already available to listen to. It is free to listen to the podcast. What can they expect, the listeners?
I think maybe I would hope to leave them with a view of a city that's really changed, an area that's really changed since 1994. The population's doubled. It's gotten more intense. Drug trafficking has changed. So much has changed. Migration has changed. That's one of the big sort of strands. And yet, it conserves this real identity as a city that just is always adapting, always adapting, always, new things happen in different parts of the globe. And suddenly they're in Tijuana, like the Ukrainians that we're seeing now, right? A world away. Um, I'm just sure if something were to happen tomorrow in, I don't know, Namibia, Tijuana would somehow feel the effects, right? I think there's some great music. I that we had a wonderful sound designer, Kurt Conan, and we had associate producers, Hafsa Fatima and Eliza Manukian. So it's a real team effort, right? It's not just me. I'm the one who's sitting here, but it's many people.
Definitely. Yes, Sandra. I have listened to the 2 episodes that are available. It's excellent. I really like it. Has very high quality, as you mentioned, production where they intersect stories, they intersect voiceovers, they intersect music, as you said, and then of course there's you talking about your experiences and the stories. I do want to mention that Border City is a new podcast from the San Diego Union-Tribune, presented by the Los Angeles Times and hosted by Sandra Dibble. Sandra, you mentioned that for newcomers or for people maybe that don't visit Tijuana as often or haven't been there, I know you continue to visit. Where would be some of your favorite locations or 1 or 2 locations that you would recommend that they visit in Tijuana?
Oh, well, the Sicut is a great one that you showed the picture earlier. It's just when I actually brought visitors, I know a couple of years ago, we went straight for the Sicut. There's always some activity going on there. There's always a little cafe if you just want to see. There's photos on the wall. There's a museum of the Californias, and the Sicut is also in the Rio zone, which is sort of a very central shopping area. There's the Plaza Rio next door, and then the Rio zone has some really excellent restaurants, right? Misión 19 is sort of very internationally known, but there are many others, and maybe you just want tacos. You also could just take an Uber to Avenida Revolucion. That's really changed. It's sort of historically been the U.S. kind of tourist district, and now there's a lot more Mexicans than ever. And it's interesting. It's because you get that downtown vibe in Avenida Revolucion, and right next to it is Constitucion. I would stick with those until I really knew the city better. I wouldn't just, pick up and wander into places I don't know. I would try to at first just get familiar with these places. Meet Tijuanenses, talk to them. They're wonderful people. You don't know who you'll meet.
Definitely. Thank you very much. And Sandra shares a lot more on the podcast. You can listen to it at San Diego Uniontribune.com/Border City or wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts. Sandra, I also want to say thank you to Hafsa Fatima. She said thank you. She said yay. I did share her comment on screen. Here it is. You probably know who she is. I know you have a lot of fans in the community and a lot of people that follow you and respect your journalism. Thank you very much for being on the show. It's an honor to interview you, and thank you very much for sharing all of your stories of news that you covered on the border area and your personal experience with Tijuanenses and the culture over there as well. Something else that you'd like to add?
No, I just feel so honored and fortunate, and I can't believe I got to cover this amazing region for so long, and that I'm still here and I'm still doing it. And I feel so lucky that you are interviewing me today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sandra. I appreciate it. Thank you all for watching today. Again, you can listen to the episodes. It's an 8-part podcast. New episodes available on Tuesdays. There's already 2 episodes available. You can listen at San Diego Uniontribune.com/Border City or wherever you get your podcasts. And also, thank you very much for watching today. If you would like to watch more episodes of Together San Diego, you can visit San Diego Uniontribune.com/Together SD Live. And if you would like to watch more of our live streams, you can go to San Diego Uniontribune.com/UT Today. Sandra, thank you very much for being on the show with us today. It's been wonderful to get to know you better and wonderful to interview you as well. And I look forward to listening to the next 6 episodes of the podcast as they drop on Tuesdays. Thank you, Sandra, and thank you everybody for watching. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
News is more important today than ever before.
I'm currently outside Otay Mesa Detention Center.
I'm about to get a report at Sharp.
Out at Sunset Cliffs.
COVID testing site.
We live for these times when we're able to bring the news into the homes of people who need it the most.
I thank all of you for supporting our work.
When you subscribe to the paper, you're telling us that you believe in what we do.